All right, guys, we are on Meditations, Book 8, Marcus Aurelius. This too is a counter to pretension that you have lost now the chance to live your whole life, or at least your adult life, as a philosopher. Indeed, it has become clear to many, yourself included, that you are far from philosophy. You are tarnished then, difficult for you now to win the reputation of a philosopher, and besides, your station in life is a contrary pull. So if you have a true perception of how things lie, abandon any concern for reputation and be satisfied if you can just live the rest of your life, whatever remains, in the way your nature wishes. You must consider then what those wishes are, and then let nothing else distract you. You know from experience that in all your wanderings you have nowhere found the good life, not in logic, not in wealth, not in glory, not in indulgence, nowhere. Where then is it to be found? In doing what man's nature requires. And how is he to do this but having principles to govern his impulses and actions? What are these principles? Those of good and evil, the belief that nothing is good for a human being which does not make him just, self-controlled, brave, and free, and nothing evil which does not make him the opposite of these. Ask yourself this about each action. How does this sit with me? Shall I regret it? In a short while I am dead and all things are gone. What more do I want if this present work is that of an intelligent and social being sharing one law with God? Alexander, Julius Caesar, Pompey, what are they to Diogenes, Heraclitus, Socrates? So Alexander, Julius Caesar, Pompey, what are they to Diogenes, Heraclitus, Socrates? These men saw into reality its causes and its material, and their directing minds with their own masters. And their directing minds were their own masters. As for the former, they were slaves to all their ambitions. So right here he mentions three emperors: Alexander, Julius Caesar, Pompey. What are they to Diogenes? Diogenes was a homeless philosopher. Heraclitus, Socrates. These men saw into reality its causes, its material, and their directing minds were their own masters. As for the former, which are the emperors, they were slaves to all their ambitions. Even if you burst with indignation, they will still carry on regardless. First, do not be upset. All things follow the nature of the whole. And in a little while you will be no one and nowhere, as it is true now even of Hadrian and Augustus. Next, concentrate on the matter in hand and see for what it is. Remind yourself of your duty to be a good man and rehearse what man's nature demands. Then do it straight and unswerving, or say what you best think right. Always, though, in kindness, integrity, and sincerity. So do not be. All things follow the nature of the whole, and in a little while you will be no one and nowhere. So remind yourself of your duty. Okay, next, concentrate on the matter in hand and see for what it is. What man's nature demands. Man's nature. The work of universal nature is to translate this reality to another, to charge things, to take them from here and carry them there. All things are mutations, but there was equality too in their distribution. All was familiar, no cause then for fear of anything new. Every living organism is fulfilled when it follows the right path for its own nature. For a rational nature, the right path is to withhold assent to anything false or obscure in the impressions made on its mind, to direct its impulses solely to social action, to reserve its desires and aversions to what lies in our power, and to welcome all that is assigned to it by universal nature, because it is a part of universal nature, just as the nature of the leaf is part of the plant's nature, except that in the case of the leaf, its nature partakes of a nature which lacks perception or reason and is liable to impediment, whereas man's nature is part of a nature which is unimpeded, intelligent, and just, and that to each creature it gives fair and appropriate allocations of duration, substance, cause, activity, and experience. But do not look to find a one-to-one correspondence in every case, but rather in an overall equivalence. The totality of this is to the aggregate of that. The totality of this to the aggregate of that. Not possible to study, but possible to reign in arrogance, possible to triumph over pleasures and pains, possible to rise above mere glory, possible not to be angry with the unfeeling and the ungrateful, and even, yes, to care for them. Possible not to be angry with the unfeeling and the ungrateful, and even, yes, to care for them. Let nobody anymore hear you blaming palace life, Don't hear yourself blaming it. Let nobody anymore hear you blaming Pallas life. Don't hear yourself blaming it. Regret is a censure of yourself for missing something beneficial. The good must be something beneficial and of concern to the wholly good person. Not wholly good person would regret missing a pleasure. Therefore, pleasure is neither beneficial nor a good. What is this thing in itself, in its own constitution? What are its elements of substance and material? And of cause? What is its function in the world? What is its duration? When you are reluctant to get up from your sleep, remind yourself that it is your constitution and man's nature to perform social acts, whereas sleep is something you share with dumb animals. Now, what accords with the nature of each being is thereby the more closely related to it, the more in its essence, and indeed the more to its liking. Constantly test your mental impressions. Test your mental impressions, each one individually if you can. Investigate the cause, identify the emotion, apply the analysis of logic. Whenever you meet someone, ask yourself first this immediate question: what beliefs does this person hold about the good and bad in life? Because if he believes this or that about pleasure and pain and their constituents, about fame and obscurity, death and life, then I shall not find it surprising or strange if he acts in this way or that way, and I shall remember that he has no choice but to act as he does. It would be absurd to be surprised at a fig tree bearing figs. Remember that there was a little cause for surprise if the world brings forth fruits such as these when the crop is there. Equally absurd for a doctor or ship's captain to be surprised at fever in a patient or a headwind springing up. Remember that to change course or accept correction leaves you just as free as you were. The action is your own, driven by your own impulse and judgment, indeed your own intelligence. If the choice is yours, why do the thing? But if it is another's choice, what do you blame, Adam's or God's? Either is madness. There is no blame. If you can, put him right. If you can't, at the least put the matter itself right. If that too is impossible, what further purpose does blame serve? Nothing should be done without purpose. What dies does not pass out of the universe. If it remains here and is changed, then here too it is resolved into the everlasting constituents, which are the elements of the universe and of you yourself. These too change, and make no complaint of it. Everything has come into being for a purpose. A horse, say, a vine. Does this surprise you? Even the sun will say, I came into being for a purpose. Likewise, the other gods. For what purpose then were you created? For your pleasure? Just see whether this idea can be entertained. Nature's aim for everything includes its cessation just as much as its beginning and its duration. Like someone throwing up a ball, how can it be good for the ball on the way up and bad on the way down? Or even when it hits the ground, how can it be good for a bubble when it forms and bad when it bursts? A candle was a similar example. A candle is a similar example. Turn it inside out and see what it is like, what it becomes in age, sickness, death. Turn it inside out and see what it is like. That's great. Turn it inside out and see what it is like. What it becomes in age, sickness, death. Life is short both for praiser and praised, for the remembering and the remembered, and this, moreover, in just a cranny of one continent. Even here, not all are attuned to each other, or even an individual to himself, and the whole earth is a mere point in space. Concentrate on the subject or the act in question, on principle or meaning. You deserve what you're going through. You would rather become good tomorrow than be good today. That's like his most aggressive line he's had so far. You deserve what you're going through. But it's true, you know? It's the nature of it. Doing something, I do it with reference to the benefit of mankind. Something happening to me, I accept it in reference to the gods and the universal source from which all things spring, interrelated. Just as you see your bath, all soap, sweat, grime, greasy water, the whole thing disgusting, so was every part of life and every object in it. Lucile buried Verus, then Lucile was buried. Secunda buried Maximus, then Secunda next. So with Epichanus and Diotimus and Antoninus and Faustina, the same story always. Salus saw Hadrian to his grave and then went to his own grave. Where are they now, those sharp minds, those prophets or prigs? Certainly Charix, Demetrius, Eudaimon and others like them were sharp minds, but all creatures of a day long dead. Some not remembered even briefly, some turned into legend, and some now vanishing even from legend. So remember this, that either the poor compound of your body must be scattered, or your frail spirit must be extinguished, or else migrate and take its post elsewhere. Man's joys is to do man's proper work, and work proper to man is benevolence to his own kind, disdain for the stirrings of the senses, diagnosis of impressions he can trust, contemplation of universal nature and all things thereby entailed. Disdain for the stirrings of the senses, like he's fighting his emotions, but he's at least aware that he's in a fight, you know. 3 relations: first to your environment, second to the divine cause, which is the source of all that happens to all men, third to your fellows and contemporaries. Pain is an evil either to the body, so let the body give its evidence, or to the soul, but the soul can preserve its own clear sky and calm voyage by not assessing pain as an evil. Every judgment, every impulse, desire, and rejection is within the soul, where nothing evil can penetrate. Erase the impressions on your mind by constantly saying to yourself, it is in my power now to keep this soul of mine free from any vice or passion or any other disturbance at all, but seeing all things for what they are. I can treat them on their merits. Remember this power which nature gives you. When you speak in the Senate or to any individual, be straightforward, not pedantic. Use language which rings true. The court of Augustus, wife, daughter, grandson, stepson, sister, Agrippa, relatives, household friends, Aurelius, Maecenas, doctors, diviners, an entire court dead. Go on now to other cases where it is not the death of just one individual, but of a whole family, like the Pompeys, and there was the inscription you see on tombstones, the last of his line. The last of his line. Just think of all the anxiety of previous generations to leave behind an heir, and then one has to be the last. Here again, the death of a whole family. You must compose your life action by action and be satisfied if each action achieves its own end as best can be, and no one can prevent you from that achievement. But there will be some external obstacle, no obstacle though to justice, self-control, and reason. But perhaps some other source of action will be obstructed. Well, gladly accept the obstruction as it is, make a judicious change to meet the given circumstance, and another action will immediately substitute and fit into the composition of your life as discussed. Accept humbly, let go easily. Accept humbly, let go easily. Short and powerful. If you have ever seen a severed hand or foot or a head cut off and lying some way away from the rest of the body, analogous is what someone does to himself, as far as he can when he will not accept his lot and severs himself from society, does some unsocial act. Suppose you have made yourself an outcast from the unity of nature. You were born a part of it, but now you have cut yourself off. Yet here lies the paradox, that it is open to you to rejoin that unity. No other part has this privilege from God, to come together again once it has been separated and cut away. Just consider the grace of God's favor to man. He has put it in man's power not to be broken off from the whole in the first place, and also, if he has broken off, to return and grow back again, resuming his role as a member. Just as the nature of the whole is the source of all other faculties and every rational creature, so it has given us this power too, in the same way that nature turns to its own purpose anything obstructive or contrary, placing in it the fated scheme of things and making it part of itself, so the rational being can also convert every obstacle into material for his own use and use it to further whatever his original purpose was. Do not let the panorama of your life oppress you. Do not dwell on the various troubles which may have occurred in the past or may occur in the future. Just ask yourself in each instance of the present, what is there in this work which I cannot endure or support? You will be ashamed to make any such confession. Then remind yourself that it is neither the future nor the past which weighs on you, but always the present, and the present burden reduces, if only you can isolate it, and accuse your mind of weakness if it cannot hold against something thus striped bare. Is Panthea or Pergamus still sitting by the coffin of Verus, or Chabrias or Diotimus by Hadrian's? Ridiculous. And if they were still sitting there, would the dead be aware? And if they were aware, would they be pleased? And if they were pleased, would that make their mourners immortal? Was it not their fate also first to grow old women and old men like any others, and then to die? And with them dead, what will those they mourn do then? It is all stench and corruption in a bag of bones. If you have sharp sight, use it. But as the poet says, add wise judgment. If you have sharp sight, use it. But as the poet says, add wise judgment. In the constitution of the rational being, I can see no virtue that counters justice, but I do see the counter to pleasure, self-control. If you remove your judgment of anything that seems painful, you yourself stand quite immune to pain. What self? Reason. But I am not just reason. Granted, so let your reason cause itself no pain. And if some other part of you is in trouble, it can form its own judgment for itself. An obstacle to sense perception is harmful to animal nature. An obstacle to impulse is likewise harmful to animal nature. So he's saying we're not animals, you know. We have a mind that can think. An obstacle to sense perception is harmful to animal nature. An obstacle to impulse is likewise harmful to animal nature. Something else will be similarly obstructive and harmful to the constitution of plants. It follows that an obstacle to the mind is harmful to intelligent nature. Now apply all this to yourself. Is pain or pleasure affecting you? That is for the senses. You have formed an impulse and then met some obstruction. If this was an unconditional aim, then yes, the obstruction harms your rational nature. But if you accept what is common experience, no harm is yet done or hindrance caused. You see, no one else will impede the proper functions of the mind. The mind cannot be touched by fire, still, tyranny, slander, or anything whatever once it has become a perfect round in solitude. I have no cause to hurt myself. I have never consciously hurt anyone else. Joy varies from person to person. My joy is if I keep my directing mind pure, denying no human being or human circumstance, but looking on all things with kindly eyes, by being kind, giving welcome or use to each as it deserves. Giving welcome or use to each as it deserves. Look, make yourself a gift of this present time. Those who are more inclined to pursue fame hereafter fail to reckon that the next generation will have people just like those they dislike now, and they too will die. What, anyway, is it to you if this is the echo in future voices, and this the judgment they make of you? Pick me up and throw me where you will. Wherever I land, I shall keep the God within me happy, satisfied, that is, if attitude and action follow its own constitution. If attitude and action follow its own constitution. Is this present thing any good reason for my soul to be sick and out of sorts? Humbled, craving, shackled, shying? Will you find any good reason for that? Nothing can happen to any human being outside the experience which is natural to humans. An ox, too, experiences nothing foreign to the nature of oxen. A vine, nothing foreign to the nature of vines. A stone, nothing outside the property of a stone. So if each thing experiences what is usual and natural for it, why should you complain? Universal nature has brought you nothing you can't endure. I think he's saying in a more, I don't know, in a less darker, people get murdered and killed and shit. If your distress has, but he even talked about death. If you just accept death as what it is, then that's what it is, If your distress has some external cause, it is not the thing itself that troubles you, but your own judgment of it. Exactly. That's what I was trying to get at. And you can erase this immediately. If it is something in your own attitude that distresses you, no one stops you correcting your view. So too, if you are distressed and not achieving some action you think salutary, why not carry on rather than fret? But there's an obstacle in the way too solid to move. No cause for distress then, since the reason for failure does not lie with you. But life is not worth living if I fail in this. Well, then you must depart this life as gracious in death as one who does. So someone's saying this, but life is not worth living if I fail in this. Well, then you must depart this life as gracious in death as one who does achieve his purpose, and at peace too with those who stood in your way. He's covering all corners. Remember that your directing mind becomes invincible when it withdraws into its own self-sufficiency, not doing anything it does not wish to do, even if its position is unreasonable. How much more then when the judgment it forms is reasoned and deliberate? That is why a mind free from passions is a fortress. People have no stronger place of retreat, and someone taking refuge here is then impregnable, like you can't penetrate it or break it. Anyone who has not seen this is short of wisdom. Anyone who has seen it and does not take refuge is short of fortune. Do not elaborate to yourself beyond what your initial impressions report. You have been told that so-and-so is maligning you. That is the report. You have not been told that you are harmed. I see that my little boy is ill. That is what I see. I do not see that he is in danger. So always stay like this within your first impressions, and do not add conclusions from your own thoughts. And then that is all. Or rather, you can add the conclusion of one acquainted with all that happens in the world. A bitter cucumber? Throw it away. Brambles in the path? Go around them. That is all you need without going on to ask, so why are these things in the world anyway? That question would be laughable to a student of nature, just as any carpenter or cobbler would laugh at you if you objected to the sight of shavings or offcuts from their work on the shop floor. Yet they have somewhere to throw their rubbish, whereas the nature of the whole has nothing outside itself. The marvel of its craft is that it sets its own confines and recycles into itself all within them which seems to be decaying, growing old or losing its use, and then creates afresh this same material. This way requires no substance other than its own, and has no need for a rubbish dump. So it is complete in its own space, its own material, and its own craftsmanship. Do not be dilatory in action, muddled in communication, or vague in thought. Don't let your mind settle into depression or elation. Allow some leisure in your life. So don't try not to be depressed or like too high, but do not be dilatory in action, muddled in communication, or vague in thought. It's saying to have a purpose, but also to allow yourself some leisure time. So in quotes, they kill, they cut in pieces, they hunt with curses. What relevance has this to keeping your mind pure, sane, sober, just? As if a man were to come up to a spring of clear, sweet water and curse it, it will still continue to bubble up water good to drink. He could throw in mud or dung. In no time the spring will break it down, wash it away, and take no color from it. How then can you secure an everlasting spring and not a cistern? By keeping yourself at all times intent on freedom and staying kind, simple, and decent. Someone who does not know that there is an ordered universe does not know where he is. Someone who does not know the natural purpose of the universe does not know who he is or what the universe is. Someone who fails in any one of these ways cannot tell the purpose of his own existence either. So what do you think of the man who fears or courts the applause of an audience who have no idea where they are or who they are? Do you want the praise of a man who curses himself 3 times an hour? Do you want to please a man who can't please himself? Can a man please himself when he regrets almost everything he does? Don't now just take your breath from the surrounding air, but take your thoughts too from the mind, which embraces all things. The power of the mind spreads everywhere and permeates no less than the air. It is there for all who want to absorb it, just like the air for those who can draw breath. Wickedness overall does no harm to the universe. Individual wickedness does no harm to the recipient. It is only harmful to the perpetrator, and he has the option to rid of it just as soon as he himself decides. Kind of meaning forgiveness, To my determining will, my neighbor's will is as indifferent as his breath in his body. Sure, we are born above all for the sake of each other. Nevertheless, the directing mind of each of us has its own sovereignty. Otherwise, my neighbor's wickedness would be my own harm, and this was not God's intention to leave my misfortune up to another. The sun appears to pour itself down, and indeed its light pours in all directions, but the stream does not run out. This pouring is linear extension. That is why its beams are called rays, because they radiate in extended lines. You can see what a ray is if you observe the sun's light entering a dark room through a narrow opening. It extends in a straight line and impacts, so to speak, on any solid body in its path which blocks passage through the air on the other side. It settles there and does not slip off or fall. Something similar will be true of the flow and diffusion of the universal mind. Not an exhaustible stream, but rather a constant radiation. And there will be nothing forceful or violent in its impact on the obstacles it meets. It will not fall off, but will settle there and illuminate what receives it. Anything unreflective will deprive itself of that light. He who fears death fears either unconsciousness or another sort of consciousness. Now, if you will no longer be conscious, you will not be conscious either of anything bad. If you are to take on a different consciousness, you will be a different being, and life will not cease. Men are born for the sake of each other, so either teach or tolerate. An arrow flies in one way, the mind in another. Yet even when it is keeping on the alert or circling around an inquiry, the mind moves no less directly and straight to its target. I like that 59. Men are both for the sake of each other, or men are born for the sake of each other. So either teach or tolerate. Last one. Enter into the directing mind of everyone, and let anyone else enter your own. Enter into the directing mind of everyone, and let everyone else enter into your own. But I think you can only do that if it depends on the state of your conscience. If you're somebody who is furtive or kind of paranoid person, or somebody with things to hide, or you haven't come to peace with your own self, you're gonna be hesitant to let people come into your life, you know. So enter into the directing mind of everyone, and let anyone else enter into your own. Marcus Aurelius.